Hey neighbor, I wanted to talk to you today about some simple seed starting tips. Here we are in February, and February is probably one of my biggest months for starting seeds for my transplants. And we're going to talk about some simple tips today that will probably benefit you whether you're an experienced gardener or you're just beginning. Well, the first one is don't use any bad seed. When I talk about bad seed, I'm talking about seed that's going to give you problems germinating. Now let's go over the packaging seeds, and we'll go over storing seeds just a minute. This is your typical paper seed pack that we use on a lot of ours, and it's standard in the industry out there. Seeds do not store in these little seed packs very well. So if you're using seeds that you've had for 3 or 4 years and you've had them in these little seed packs right here, that may be gone bad, or they may not be as viable as they once was. So make sure you use good seed germinating in the greenhouse. We're going through a lot of work and expense to start these seeds. We want to make sure that we got good, viable seeds. If you're using these paper seed packs, you want to make sure that you store them well if you're not buying fresh seeds. If you're going to keep these and store them, you want to make sure that you store them in something like a Ziploc bag so that you control the humidity. Humidity on seed storage is just as important, if not more so, than what temperature is. A lot of people put these in the refrigerator, and that works fine as far as keeping the temperature down, but the humidity in the refrigerator is pretty high. So if I put this in the refrigerator just like it is, I could very well damage my seed and them not be as viable as I would like for them to be a year or two down the line. Another option is to put these in the Ziploc bag so that you control the humidity, or if you buy bigger packs of seeds or bigger quantities of seeds, we use this Mylar bag here. I love this Mylar bag because it controls the humidity in there. It does not, it's sealed, so it doesn't let air in or out. So you can place this in your refrigerator or just room temperature. It'd be fine. You can store them like that right there because you're controlling that humidity in there. Another thing that you want to keep in mind, some seeds store better than others. Tomato seeds under the right conditions, heck, you can get 20 years out of these things. Peppers, any seed that has high oil content, such as cowpeas or things like that, will not store very well at all. I would not keep a cowpea from 1 year to the next year. I would buy fresh seeds every year. Any of those seeds that's got the high oil content, just figure on not saving any of those. But your others, if you store them under the right conditions, can stay viable and be fine. The main thing here is we want to make sure we're using good seed, because seed cost is not much when you compare it to everything else and the time you use to start your seeds. So number one is use good, viable seeds. Man, here's a tip I almost forgot about because I hadn't practiced this method in a long time. But I've been seeing a lot of YouTubers, people on the internet doing this, and I said, man, we got to address it. So, folks, back in the day, the way we did starting seeds, tomatoes and peppers and things like this, and look here, I was trained this way too back in the 80s in horticulture class. What we would do is we'd take this big tray and we would sow our seeds in there, just like that right there, real thick. And when those seeds come up and they was just getting some true leaves on them, we would go in there with a pair of tweezers and we would tease them out and transplant them into a bigger pot. It was the standard of the industry back in there. It's the way everybody done things. Nowadays, don't do this. I mean, we've transitioned away from this right here. You damage those seeds too much. It's a waste of time to be broadcasting these seeds in these trays, going back in there and teasing them out when they're real tender and putting them in a tray. Nowadays, we have these trays that already have the cells in there, and it is so much easier just to plant 1 or 2 seeds per cell. We don't have to tease them out. We can get good germination, and these things grow off a lot quicker. We don't go through that transplant shock. Man, just don't even do that. We did it. I had a professor of horticulture back in the day, and he taught us to do this way because that's the way he was taught. But we've transitioned away from that. Direct seed into your trays nowadays. There's no reason whatsoever with the supplies that we have now that you should have to step anything up or down. We can grow in these 162s, 128s, or 338s, directly put them into the garden and get wonderful results. Okay, next let's talk about heat and humidity, because those things are really important. We use a heat mat, and I definitely recommend anybody wanting to start their own seeds to invest in a heat mat. You can see this Hall's heat mat right here I've used for several years. And it has on the heat mat what our soil temperature that we want to germinate at. Let's go down here and look at tomatoes. Tomatoes is 85 degrees. And the optimal germination days on that is going to be about 6 days. So this heat mat here, we want to set up ideally in an environment where the ambient temperature, where the regular temperature of the air is at about 70 degrees, because we're only going to get a 12 to 15% bump or degree bump out of this heat mat. And I got mine set up in the greenhouse, and I control the heat pretty good out here. So if you're in a greenhouse or you're in an indoor situation, it doesn't matter. You want to be at about 70 degree ambient temperature and let your heat mat bump you up to around 85 degrees on that right there. So we would want to do that. We would want to leave them on that heat mat till we seen green plants coming up. If you need to move away from that, germinate some more plants, you can move your plants off from that at that point. If you still don't need your heat mat, leave them on there and it can help supplement your heat a little bit. Domes. Domes come in many different shapes and sizes. We have several different ones. Now the way I would prefer to use a dome as a germination tool, we like to use these domes because the dome is going to increase our humidity inside there, and high humidity is very important for seed germination. We want that we want that humidity close to 85 to 100% in there. We can do that by keeping our soil medium wet, enclosing it with the dome there, and increasing that humidity so that we get that seed pop, that seed germination. Now, as soon as I see green and I see those seeds come up, I think it's a good idea at that point to remove that dome, because the dome has done its job. And we don't want high humidity on those leaves once they emerge, because we can get some disease problems at that point. Especially if you're using this outside on a hot day, you can get that greenhouse effect right here and get really high temperatures if you're using a dome there. If you're indoors, not quite as much, but when you do remove that dome, you get better air circulation and your disease pressure is dramatically reduced once you see that plants emerge. All right, let's talk about water and drainage, because this is where a lot of people fail at. We want to keep this seed medium, wet, moist, but we don't want to keep it sopping wet. Sopping, that's a term we use here in the South. We don't want it to hold water just all the time. We want that water to be able to move through so that when we wet it again, it's fresh water going in through there and it moves through. Now, as you see with this 24 seed starting kit here we use, this is the ones we sell. We also have this 12 cell that's made up the same way. You see these little channels in here? Those channels are there to allow this hole here that's going to sit in that channel so that that hole can drain. That's what we want. We want this thing to be able to drain. And if you can't, you probably can't see in there, but we've probably got a good 1/4 inch between that hole there and the bottom side of this drain so that water can drain out of there. If we're using a bottom tray like this right here, we don't want standing water in there while we're starting our seeds, because that's where we're running into some dampening off and what causes our seed to rot instead of germinate. So that's the reason I like the 24 and the 12 cell, because it's already built in those channels in there. I don't like to leave water standing in there, so if you get water standing in there, empty it out, water again from the top, and keep that emptied out there. When we are starting our seeds, we don't want to do bottom watering, because bottom watering is just going to cause us problems as far as setting water. Standing water is going to cause disease issues with dampening off and our seeds rotting. We want to keep that water, fresh water, moving through and emptied out. Now, if you're using our bigger trays, such as our 162s and our new 128s or 338s, you can see the hole size underneath there, and that's one thing I think really makes these trays wonderful, because it's got the ideal hole size there. I see some more trays where the hole size is way too big. I like this hole size right here. It's about the size of a big pencil. But with our bottom watering tray here, we have a problem. If you don't use any kind of spacer there, then that's going to sit directly down on that bottom tray and not going to allow it to drain. So what I have done right here, and I only do this when I'm just starting my seedlings, is I use something as a spacer underneath there. Now you can use anything. I just got some nuts and bolts that I put in there. And what that has done is, you can see there, I probably got a good 1/4 of an inch underneath there that allows these trays to drain out into my bottom tray here. And I'm gonna keep this emptied out just like I would on the other one right there. And I'm gonna water from the top. It's gonna drain out, keep that water, and empty my water tray here and not keep any standing water in my bottom tray before my seeds germinate. All right, so let's talk about leggy plants, because this is a big issue for most people starting plants here. If you're starting your plants outside and you're lucky enough to have a greenhouse, it's pretty much a non-issue for you because you've got that natural light. But if you're starting indoors, you're going to have a good light system, and you're going to have to get those plants underneath that light just as soon as they pop. Just as soon as you see green there, you immediately have to get them underneath good light, or you're going to have what we call leggy plants. And once you get leggy plants, you pretty much can't rescue them. I've not had any luck rescuing leggy plants before. So the whole deal here is don't get leggy plants. And just as soon as they pop through, you want to get them under a good grow light if you're not outside, and therefore not have those leggy plants. So if you do come up and mess up and get leggy plants, my recommendation is start over and change your strategy just a little bit so that you don't get those. All right, so now that we've got our seeds germinated and we're seeing green, we got them underneath supplemental light, or we're out in the greenhouse. Just as soon as we see what we call true leaves, which is probably most of the time around 4 sets of leaves, we want to think about starting to fertilize at that point. If we don't, we're going to have stunted plants. And we want to grow these plants off so they're healthy and have a nice root system, and it doesn't take forever. Now, this is my opinion. I think you're better off to go with a synthetic fertilizer when you're growing off your seedlings. And there's a couple of reasons why. It's easier, it's quicker, and it just works better because most of the time when we're starting our transplants, the weather is cool or cold, and those organic fertilizers do not convert or become available to the plants near as quick as synthetics do. So therefore, it is hard. You can talk to anybody out there, professional grower that grows organic plants, and they will tell you it's hard to grow off a transplant organically in the wintertime. It's a lot easier to do in the summertime than the wintertime. Using these synthetics, they get to the plant quick, they help it, make it grow off nice. What we like to use is our 20-20-20, which is an all-purpose fertilizer, which is a standard in the industry for growing off transplants. We use a hose cyclone mixer, and we inject our fertilizer into our wand here. So I fertilize about every 4 or 5 days here, and it makes you have a great healthy plant. So if you're just stuck and you want to grow organically, it is doable, but it's probably going to take you close to twice as long to grow off this plant as it will using something like our 20-20-20. Seed start to me is one of the most enjoyable things about gardening. I love to plant them, watch them come up, make nice healthy plants so we can transplant them in the garden. I read something the other day, and a person equated seed starting as to cooking, and I thought that made a little bit of sense. You know, once you kind of get the hang of it, you kind of got it, and you can play around with it there and kind of make it work for you. But it's kind of a science, it's kind of an art, but once you get the hang of it, you'll really enjoy the fact of starting your own plants because you can grow the plants you want to grow instead of the varieties they have at the big box stores. So it opens up the opportunities dramatically, and it's doable, and it's not that hard, and once you get the hang of it, you will be successful.